case of the dreaded time killer presents an intriguing study in crime. Before Scotland Yard finally closed their files on this baffling case, a number of men and women had been slain, each one the victim of a terrible plot, stilted direction, and abysmal dialogue. Our story opens one spring morning with the arrival of Mrs. Foote at her employer's cottage in Merton Park. Mrs. Foote is a cheerful Cockney soul who cooks, cleans, and provides comic relief. Completely honest and reliable except in one small detail, which, as fate would show, was to be her undoing. Mrs. Foote could not be trusted with dialogue.
Try to tell us we're too young to really be in love. Coolie, it's only me. Morning, Mr. Buckley. More rain about, I fancy. Looks like we're in for a dirty weekend. My leg's playing up something dreadful. Oh, reckon it's them various veins. On some mornings when I wake up, my car greenish blue. What's up? Cat got your tongue? Here. You look proper queer, Mr. Buckley. Mr. Buck?
It looked like murder. With our lighting cameraman, it always did. Within seconds, Inspector Ripper of Scotland Yard, a subtle and experienced mind, is put in charge of the investigation. He is assisted by Sergeant Stunt of the local police force.
Poor devil, stiff as a board. Better get him down to the lab, Sergeant. Just as I thought, Buckley had a criminal record. One of Nana Muscory's. Mrs. Foote, we're police officers, and we'd like to ask you a few questions.
I don't want to get into no trouble. Supposing I refuse to answer, how do I stand legally?
Sort of hunched over in the dock?
I'm not saying nothing. My lips is sealed.
Let's face it, you had a feasible motive for murder. You hated Buckley.
Me? Mr. Buckley? Oh, the very idea. Why, every time I dropped in, he'd give me facts, pour me out a brandy and tell me dirty stories. He was like a mother to me. Mother, you hear? You swine! You should be here. I'm killing poor Mr. Buckley.
Well, there was the situation. Josiah Buckley, aged about 50, found dead in his armchair. To Inspector Ripper, it looked as though Buckley had been mugged, and for a while the heavy hand of suspicion rested squarely on the shoulders of Mrs. Foote, a woman known for her mugging in over 50 bad British B pictures. The inspector could not act upon suspicion alone. The film director suspected that he could not act at all. Something about the dead man's appearance struck a familiar chord in Inspector Ripper's quicksilver mind. The Odeon murders of 1956. Was there a connection? Once again, he'd been given a lead, and once again the casting director would live to regret it.
I'm looking for a man about 40, well-built, medium height, wearing a grey trilby, probably ex-merchant navy.
For murder?
No, for companionship. Enough of my problem. Miss Lopez, have you discovered the bodies?
Yes, but I didn't do it. I swear it.
Nobody's accusing you. Now, was there anything unusual that you noticed about the patrons today? Just take your time and think.
Well,
Come on, we haven't got all night. Think.
Well, now that you come to mention it, there was something I noticed that at the sales intermission I couldn't get them interested in my raspberry delight. At first I thought they dropped off. Then when the big picture ended and the lights came up, I noticed that they still didn't move, not a flicker. It was like they was bored, stiff.
Bored stiff. Miss Lucas, I think you've just put your finger on it.
Well, you shouldn't stand so close.
Don't you see? Bored stiff. These poor unfortunate wretches were literally bored to death.
It was soon established, with the thoroughness characteristic of Inspector Ripper's investigations, that the Odeon victims had died as the result of a small, dull object coming into contact with the brain. But what was the small, dull object? Was it Look at Life? Could it have been Sandra Dawn in Roadhouse Girl? No. The answer lay in the short subject, the dreaded time killer that through the unaccountable actions of fate had brought the film-goers to their untimely end. But what was the connection with Josiah Buckley's murder? Athens, Amsterdam, Montego Bay? Inspector Ripper considered, but he knew the time and the budget for location filming were against him.
This what you're looking for, sir? Oh, good man, Sergeant. Turn to last Sunday. According to the pathologist's report, Buckley was killed about 1 a.m. Now, what program came on just before that?
Oh, the epilogue, sir. Facing God with a smile and a song.
I wouldn't have killed Buckley. Might even have given him something to live for. No, before that.
12:30, Annals of Scotland Yard, featuring the famous criminologist Edgar...
Right, we've got it. And it's the identical murder weapon, deadly boredom. Originally used in Odeons in 1956, then in television in the early 60s, and now once again they're being shown on the box at 12:30 a.m. He probably thought he'd get away with it if he struck in the early hours of the morning. But he reckoned without Ripper of the Yard.
Having given up smoking and drinking, I found it easy to give myself up too. But society should be warned. Like all habitual criminals, when the doors of Wormwood Scrubs open again, I shall be back to claim further victims with grainy film, obscure plots, and substandard direction. Good night.